Hello, this is Thomas Park, also known as Mystified, Doubting Thomas, DJ Iterate, DJ Frankenstone, Grid Resistor, Mr. Vapor, and several other pseudonyms. My parents called me son, young man, or child. Many people called me different things. My wife sometimes would call me things I shouldn't repeat, but often called me her husband or Thomas. I often go by Thomas. Thomas will be fine. I think I said that, didn't I? But when I was a kid, I was called TJ. But now we're getting beyond the point here. The point is, I wanted to say just a few words or have some thoughts about um, a problem that comes across in our culture in the West called the hero's journey, which I think in history has been seen as a way of kind of thinking about going out on one's own, usually as in this case as a young man, but really this could very easily have been a young woman or anyone going out on their own, leaving home, leaving the house where they grew up, the pastoral situation or home situation, and going out into the world and trying to succeed, make one's own way, whether that's involving finding a career or finding a partner or wife and settling down. But going out into the world and trying to deal with the challenges people find there and to find success that way. And I think some of the problems I came across personally, because for me, when I grew up, I did have some troubles, emotional and mental issues. And some of them had to do with this idea of when I left home for college with this big adventure for this big adventure to happen, my own life to begin. I was sort of anxious and in this sort of let's get the heck out of this house and just be in a new reality. I kind of saw this as I'm leaving home and I'm becoming my own person, and it's like getting into a rocket or a plane and flying far away and never coming back. And so, one of the problems that I faced was once I'm in this other culture or situation away from home, who am I now? Because I'm not my parents' son. Oh, I am, but my parents aren't there to reassure me and they're not there to guide me. And in a way, what I thought of was I knew I was part of my family, but my view was just to kind of escape this idea of being in my sort of nuclear family, of parents and a sister, and to become just kind of my own person. But the problem is a person unto themselves can be kind of hard to define a little, I think, because my status as the situation of being younger and a son as well as a person old enough to move out, etc., added sort of complexity and kind of more of a Christian or honest view of who I was than just to say I just some person who dropped from Mars and here I am, because I had a childhood, because I had a past. The things that I knew I had picked up while growing up. So anyway, the hero's journey, is seen as this great, exciting journey, and a lot of stories and myths exist about that. And a lot of them have some common elements in them. Um, Joseph Campbell, of course, for those who are fans of his work, more recently and prominently kind of put a lot of these together and kind of presented them as a set of things that are included in these stories. A lot of times, the person leaves home, they have some kind of quest, whether it's imposed on them, a geas or a quest or purpose to achieve. Go west and find your father, young man. You must go save this village, young hero, etc. You must go save the damsel in distress from the tower and bring her to freedom and safety, whatever this quest would be. A lot of times the person leaves a more naive and peaceful place that's safer. They go out into a world that has often unexpected and extreme challenges, whether these challenges are personified by monsters or people who are difficult to deal with situations. Um, Thinking about, for example, Ulysses, where the hero returning from the Trojan War on his journey with his crew, for example, lands on an island with a giant cyclops named, I think, Polyphemus or something, a monster that exemplifies certain, perhaps Freudian notions or traits. And other places along the way, for example, an island with the sirens, who are these female figures who sort of sing from a cave and beckon sailors to approach them, and then are, I guess, drowned or killed when they do. So, um, some creatures exemplifying often various trials that the hero, whether he or she has to encounter and face, in order to achieve this sort of adulthood, maturity, higher understanding, and in a way to sort of become who the hero was according to the hero's journey, which tends to be someone who both undertakes this journey towards individuation and succeeds in surviving it. And through these obstacles, defeating them, handling them, becomes more able on their own to deal with problems, gains confidence, individuation, etc. And so I think that on the one hand, it's a really neat thing. One thing I like about this idea is if you are on your own, or if you just want to read about it, you can maybe identify, or people can, with some of the challenges people face in the world, whether they exemplify certain urges or addictions, certain particular dangers and risks that they didn't maybe think about before. It's really interesting for that. When I think about, for example, the films, George Lucas's films, the Star Wars films especially, were kind of influential on me when I was a kid. I think I saw the original Star Wars when I was like 7 years old. It was absolutely the right time to see it at that age, but the great power of having this sort of hero's journey very much made into an epic science fiction sort of film, where all of these sort of traps and possible problems are very visceral and easy to see in the movie, and kind of fun. With all the music and all the flash, it really takes this sort of idea of a hero's journey and makes it very easy and fun to watch. It's like it's an entertaining set of films, I think. But I have some problems, though, and one of them is there a counterpart to the hero's journey? And I think it is this, what I would call sort of I have to say, a domestic response. A domestic response, where, to pull in some other people, what happens to, say, the parents or siblings of the hero when they leave and go on this journey? Some of them stay at home. I know in Greek myth there was Hestia, the goddess who would guard the hearth at home and keep the fire lit, while all the other gods and goddesses would run around having dramatics, wars, conflicts, horrible acts of violence, and etc. Hestia, the goddess Hestia, would stay at home and make sure that the house was protected and safe, and prepared for them all the gods and goddesses to go home and put their cloaks and coats up on the wall and have dinner and dine together after all of it was done. And actually, Hestia was seen as kind of a highly regarded goddess, but it often isn't included in the more action-packed stories about the Greek deities, but is sort of this person or a figure who's assumed to be taking care of domestic things. Therefore, both relied upon, but not very much part of the more action-packed stories. But on in a little bit more of even a darker tone, thinking of some work by Ridley Scott in his movies Alien, where there's a group of people who are on a spaceship, and they're having kind of this party where they're sitting around a table and they're doing some drinking and a little foul language, a little bit of flirtations are happening, just some very human things people do. And one figure seems very uncomfortable. Who's played by John Hurt. He seems kind of introverted and withdrawn from all the fun. He also seems a little older, maybe, or something. Something like that, but he just doesn't blend into well with the partying people. So at a certain point, he gets up and leaves the party, leaves the group, and goes on this sort of journey onto this landscape where the ship has landed. And in doing so, he finds this room or a cavern-like space, which is full of these organic sort of shapes, which then actually reveal themselves as being eggs, sort of eggs, containing an alien creature. Now, the alien creature very much represents sort of an odd and very sort of through a dark lens, a feminine, potent alien, a sort of a femininity that's also sort of hostile. When John Hurt bends over to inspect and touches one of the egg containers, it bursts open, and this sort of shape comes out, this creature, and it sort of melds itself to him, and this later becomes this whole sort of weird transformation of human beings into these symbiotic creatures that are fed upon by these aliens that have kind of this, through a feminine sort of enveloping and then using, like they would put acid into the recipient. It's really grotesque looking, and then the recipient would be used to furnish various other nutrients and slowly would be killed and replaced by an alien entity, which is later known as the isomorph in this film series. Where basically, to take a step back, the isomorph is seen as through Geiger's design and Ridley Scott's ideas, the dark side of sexuality, the dark side of femininity, particularly, of when, and to go back to the narrative, when the figure goes off from where the women are and the rest of the crew and is alone and is a solo male, which often happens for people to explore or wander. It can happen. There was this other result that was sort of happening behind it all or through, which was from a standpoint of the women and those who were still on the ship. This was someone who obviously wasn't getting along as well with them, didn't fit in, and now has gone off on their own. And the sheer sort of individualism of the hero's journey has a dark side because it irritates and angers a universal domestic or effeminate influence, where people who just want to stay at home, people want to preserve culture, people who want it not to change or evolve or be damaged by other influences, etc., technology, whatever, have as their foe these people who just go out and make more and more of this development happen, and are often seen as these sort of often portrayed as male or masculine sort of I think the term was sort of a space jockey or space cowboy type person, which is kind of like this version of the hero. But the point is, the hero's journey, the hero's quest, has this reaction from home of, for you, you've gone to school as I have, but how are your parents feeling about this fact that you're there? For me, I was like in this new reality. I could do anything I wanted, but I don't think that's what my parents would think. And I'm pretty sure that at home they did think about me now and then, but I was doing everything I could to forget about being from home and having this new life. So, and I'm getting to this point fairly quickly, the hero's journey does suggest a one-way journey, but it's seen as almost a linear trajectory. And at the end of this journey, of course, again, the idea is the hero has had these experiences, our heroine, and now has a better ability to be an individual who can make decisions with confidence because they face these trials. But it can often be a very harrowing and harsh journey, and I wish there were some things people could do to take away a little bit of the sting of moving out on one's own by heroizing this huge epic journey away into the world with all of these very death-defying and harsh challenges, which are often dramatized or melodramatized or exaggerated, but still, there are those who would nod and agree, yeah, there were challenges like that in life. To another idea from the hero's journey to a notion of a walkabout, which I was thinking of the best term I could find. A walkabout is a phrase I think that originated in Australia, and it might have been quite possibly involved some of the indigenous people there. I think it may have, where rather than a hero's journey, it's kind of a bit of a meander of an idea, where the individual goes out and sort of meanders and explores and wanders around a certain area, but it doesn't imply this trajectory away into this other reality. Instead, it sort of calls to mind a less linear wandering around, discovering and experiencing things, learning about different places, etc. But the walkabout feels to me a little bit more reserved and less like this dramatic movement, vector movement away from the domestic scene, but instead suggests that there is a journey, but it shouldn't be seen as this escape from home, because what I discovered was I would have to redefine myself as, again, a child of my parents and a brother of my sister, etc., to regain some of my values and health and mental health and emotional health back. I had to acknowledge basically that I was in many ways the same person I was raised to be. And I couldn't just pretend to be on this journey where I would forget all of that and go away, because that's just who I was. If I tried to put all that aside, I found very little left, other than various pangs of hunger and desire or need I'd have, or things I'd have to do. Who was I, anyway, if not who I'd grown up to be? That was foolish and naive of me to think that I could just take that off like a suit of clothes and hang it up. That was part of who I was. So some quibbles with the hero's journey, how dangerous, epic, and linear it seems to be that a person must leave the pastoral, must leave the domestic scene with this act of violent departure and suddenness, never to return the same. It's just a very epic quality. Of course, it's called an epic journey, but I prefer this term walkabout to take a little bit of the energy and necessity from this myth of the hero's journey or heroine's journey and say, what instead if the person is seen to go about and wander a bit, to explore indeed, but in an area that is already somewhat known and without this sense of linear trajectory. When a good person goes on a walkabout, I am told, it is often to consider problems, to meditate on issues. Sometimes a person will go on a walkabout if they're upset and need to recover their level of calm or stability. So they would go out and walk about and experience nature until they were reset and recharged and then come back. Maybe it's more like going on a camping trip or a sabbatical, a walkabout, something like it, instead of a hero's journey. Even though it takes a little bit of the epic quality out of this idea, it takes a little bit of the epic quality out of this idea, where a person can have a consistency between who they grew up to be and who they became as adults, and not have this urge, temptation, or inspiration to have a radical break and try to recreate everything completely. Can rather perceive the whole thing as an organic whole, and the narratives of their life would be maybe less dramatically affected by leaving home. If again the impression was to wander about, there's a musician friend I have, or mentor of mine actually, Robin Story, who wrote an album which he called A Walkabout. And as I recall what was going on, the politics were really bothering him. He's a very politically charged person, and there were some really bad politics going on, particularly in the United States, and he lives in England. But it bothered him enough that he left his situation and went on sort of a creative walkabout in creating this album. The act of creating the album was to journey out into sound and use these different ideas and sounds to help him escape and consider the problems in the world and try to recalibrate himself. And the idea was when the album was finished, like a walkabout, he would then feel better able to deal with the political realities that bothered him. So, just some thoughts I wanted to share with people that might have helped prevent some of the problems I had when I was growing up. Thomas Park here, and hope you have a good day.